Hello, my name is Starla Henderson and with Fronterhouse Quilts, and we are still working on our sunflower. Actually, this will be the last step in this. This is I designed a simple flowers for this because this is a new technique. It's new to me too. I'm kind of learning as I go, so as I figure new things out, new and better ways, I'll let you know. And but today, last week, we glue basted our petals together, and the week before that we wrapped our fabric around our templates to make our petals. And today I'm going to show you what I do to sew them together, which is really very simple. And so I'm going to last week we did this part, and I went on ahead and glued mine together so it's ready to sew. And I'm going to talk a little bit first though about thread. Anytime you're doing any kind of English paper piecing, or in this case, this makes me think of English paper piecing, only it is more of it's applique. I still don't know what to call it except maybe paper applique. But if you use cotton thread, and I found this out the hard way, every time you take a stitch, you are running up against that paper, and that paper acts like a saw to your thread, and it shreds it. And a couple years ago, I was doing a lot of English paper piecing, working on a hexagon quilt that I'm still working on, and I kept having this problem. I was getting more and more frustrated with it. I couldn't figure it out, so I went online, and it just didn't occur to me that this would happen. And what they suggested that you do is you use a poly thread, a polyester thread, instead of a natural fiber such as cotton, because it's a little stronger. So I did, and it did work. Now, for applique and for my English paper piecing now, I have happened upon another product, and it is polyester as well. It's sold by Superior Threads. It's their bottom line. It is 60 weight, so it's a very fine thread. It's polyester, it's strong, and it is so fine. It's such a small thread that you have a very hard time seeing it once you've sewn it into your applique. And I use this for all of my applique, needle turn as well as this technique, because it just embeds itself in your fabric, and it makes it a lot harder to see your stitches. There are a couple of tricks to using this thread I've discovered, for me anyway, and it's a very fine thread. So you can use a very small needle. I still use the same needle I've always used, which is a number 7. I think this is a number 7, and I like it because I can see the head of the eye of the needle. But when you get it in there, as you're working with this is it's got a silky finish to it, and it's going to pull out of your needle, and that's very frustrating. So what I have started doing, and this is such a fine thread that it actually works, is I have started just tying an overhand knot towards the end of my thread where my needle is. And you don't even realize it. If you were to do this on regular cotton thread, it would pull every time you pull through it, and sometimes it might not pull through. But this does, and in fact, I'm going to show you how to knot this thread off too, because it is such a silky finish. Sometimes as I'm working with this, it'll pull loose even from this knot. So don't be surprised if that happens. Now I'm going to put a knot at the end of my thread and grab my thimble here. And if you look at the back, this is what the back of your piece ought to look at. You keep your papers in it until after we have this appliqued to our background, which is going to be the last step in this whole quilt. We're going to make every one of our flowers before we ever applique them down. So don't get anxious about that. That's one of our last steps. So this is what it looks like. Once you get this made, just find you a safe place and stack them up. So here we go. I'm going to pick a place, and also, before we do this, sometimes because you've got such small pieces down here, you're going to have a place where your seam allowance from one of your under pieces is poking out of one of your over pieces. That happens, so I just take my scissors and just clip it back a little bit, because this is glued. It pulls away pretty easily for you to do this. So you just trim it off. In fact, I'm going to trim both of these just a little bit just to make sure it doesn't do that to me. Now I'm going to start. And just like before, I'm going to come up from underneath. I'm going to come up into the seam allowance, and I'm going to come up into that crease just like I would if I needle turned this and I had this little piece already turned. I'm going to come into my crease, and it's the same stitch as we've been doing for needle turn applique, except you're not having to turn anything. You've got this whole piece, and I'm going to start right here and take a tiny stitch, tiny bite, and work my way up. And this is the only frustrating part about it, is sometimes your thread gets caught on the rest of your piece. And I'm just going to keep working my way up. You do end up having to knot off a lot with this, because you're going to come to the end of this and you're going to have to end. But you know, you might anyway. Okay. Here we go. But with this technique, everything's turned. I know that some people, points literally scare them to death. They're like, I'll never be able to do that. It looks too hard. And it is hard. It does take practice. This does too. However, I think it's much more doable for a lot of people, and it's a good place to start. Okay, I'm going to go all the way to the end, and then I'm going to show you how I knot this off. And I just keep working. See, and as I'm sewing, this thread does run up against the edge of the paper, because that's where I'm sewing, is along the edge. But with this superior bottom line thread, it does not break on me. Okay. And as I get to the end of my piece, of the little spot that I'm sewing, I'm going to prepare here. I'm going to come up, make sure all my stitches are pulled tight like they're supposed to be. And I know you can't see this on film, but you can't see it in person either. And that's a good thing, because with this thread, it hides your stitches so well, it's really hard to find them. The only evidence of it being there really is sometimes just because the fabric is distorted a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to go back through to the back, right in front of, under where the last stitch came out, and into the other piece there. Alright, now this is something I learned from Sue Daly's website. She uses bottom line thread too for her English paper piecing, and she may use it also for her applique. I really don't know. I'm going to take a knotting stitch here in my seam allowance, and because you've still got that paper in there, you don't worry about going through to the other side, which is really kind of nice. And I'm going to pull it up once, and then I'm going to do it again. And I'm not going to pull it out, okay? Now this is hard to see. You've got a piece of thread coming out of the bottom of your needle, the eye of your needle, and you've got a piece of, you've got the other end of the thread coming out of your fabric. And basically you're going to wrap them around your needle in opposite directions. So you're going to take, it doesn't matter which one you start with, you're going to take one and go around one way and wrap it around your needle, and the other, go around the other way and wrap it around your needle. Now I'm going to try and zoom in, and maybe you can see that a little bit better, I hope. Hold on just a minute. Okay, here's my thread. Let me get a hold of it here. This is the thread that is coming out of the fabric, and I'm going to wrap, it's on, right now it's on the left side of my needle. I'm going to wrap it under the needle and bring it up on the right side. Then I'm going to take my thread that's coming from the eye where I threaded it, and I'm going to do the same thing, only the opposite. I'm going to come from my right side, wrap it under, and come back up on my left side. And you've basically crossed your thread, you know, onto the underside of your needle. And I know this is not a good focus. I was just hoping you could see it a little bit better. And then you're simply going to pull it through. In Australia, they call this a knicker knot, and I think of little pants that little boys used to wear, knickers, little shorts. I don't know, but that's what she calls it. But it makes kind of a figure 8 if you look at it. And you're just going to pull this through, and it's like it double knots it. And then your thread is secure. It's not gonna it's gonna keep it knotted off, because this is a very silky finish, and that's the best way. And I have had on my paper piecing this kind of come loose a few times. Okay, I'm going to take you back down. Okay, so then you're ready to trim, you know, cut your thread, knot it, and go on to your next one. Now, what I would do normally, and I was starting at the plan it out, and I didn't plan this one as well as I should have, because I was thinking about what I was saying instead of what I was doing. But I would come up here and I would start at this side, I come down, and I'd make one of those knots here, and I wouldn't even cut my thread. I'd come back over here and knot it, or you can cut your thread, it may be easier for you to do that, and come back up. And I just go all the way around that way, because you're going to be doing that. Now, you can, if it's easier for you, for some reason I just have an easier time holding this. If I can find what I did with my center, there it is. You can go ahead and glue this down in your center, because that's going to be your last step on this, is to sew around. But you can go ahead and glue this down if it works better for you. And it just depends on the flower. Sometimes it does for me and sometimes it doesn't. And I think I did this one both ways. And you can sew just a little bit over here and sew over here. But you're still going to have to sew these little pieces in, and that's one reason I was doing it this way, because it just worked better for me. But after you get all of this sewn, you're going to, then I will glue base this in place where it covers all of my raw edges, and then I will do the same thing. I'll just sew all the way around it with a thread that matches. And then your flower is done. So it's really a very simple process. And then this is finished. Put it aside and move on to your next flower. And the very last thing that we will do is applique these down. That's, you know, that won't happen putting anything on the background, appliquing it to your background, until we have everything ready and assembled. So, and it makes placing it that much more fun for me. But this is Starla Henderson with Fronterhouse Quilts, and this is how you make your sunflower for our summer sampler. Thank you for joining me.